Okay, it's 7:02, so we're going to get started. A few more people might trickle in, but I'm sure we can answer any questions that they have. All right, so my name is Madeline Gorschels. I am the town's Stormwater Outreach Coordinator. I am joined by my colleague, Cynthia O'Connell, who is the Stormwater Manager for the town of Braintree, and we're discussing the potential Braintree green stormwater infrastructure sites. Okay, so as I mentioned, please remain muted. This will make it so we can actually get through the meeting smoothly without any issues. If you are new to Zoom and you're not sure how to mute yourself, the mute button is at the lower left-hand corner of the screen in a red circle. And if you're joining us via the phone, in order to mute yourself, you have to go *6. So to mute yourself, that's *6. And to unmute yourself, you also have to tap *6. So if you would like to type a question or to leave a comment, please do so in the chat. The chat box can be found close to the mute button at the bottom of the screen, circled in red here. When you click that button, a box will pop up. And when you're leaving a message, please make sure you're sending it to everyone so everyone can see what questions have been asked and I can see the questions you're asking. And we will be reading these questions and comments aloud, but we're going to wait till the end of the meeting to do that. Now, if you're joining us via the phone and you would like to ask a question because you're not going to be able to use the chat feature, please dial *9, that's *9, and that will let us know that you wish to speak, and then we will ask you to unmute. So please don't unmute yourself and start talking, we will call on you. And remember, if you would like to unmute, you dial *6. Okay, some final rules. Please don't repeat questions. You can definitely emphasize that you agree with someone in your question, but it's helpful to keep the conversation going. And like I said before, questions and comments will be read after the presentation. So you can type questions in the chat box while we're going if you think of them, but we're not going to address them till the end of the presentation. And we're going to prioritize answering questions for people who have not had a chance to ask a question. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them, but we may follow up later in our exit after the meeting, but we might have to wait afterwards. All these questions and comments will be saved after the meeting in a text file, so we'll be able to go through everything and make sure that we've adequately addressed everyone's feedback and questions. All right, so if you still have more feedback after the meeting's over, we're going to be doing a quick survey, and I'll throw this link in the chat for everyone to fill out at the end. All right, the other thing I want to mention is that this is the first of 2 public meetings, and the second one will be in the summer of 2021. And it may seem like we're a little early in the process for comment, but I think it's really important to get people involved as early as possible so they can help inform decision making instead of just comment on the decisions we've already made. So I really want you to share what you think so we can use that to inform our work. Okay, so for those of you not familiar with the Town of Braintree Stormwater Division, we are relatively new. We were founded in 2018, and we protect the Town of Braintree from harmful flooding and pollution through proactive maintenance, public education, and infrastructure modernization. So you can see some of the proactive maintenance at work. This is our field foreman, Nick, cleaning out a catch basin in October 2020, and this is part of our regular maintenance program. So we're addressing stormwater infrastructure on a regular schedule instead of just addressing it when there are issues. So that's one of the important things that we do as a division. We also have a public education piece that I will get to in a second. And we also do infrastructure modernization, sort of related to projects like this. So installing new green stormwater infrastructure and other projects that are needed. So getting into our public education point, stormwater runoff contains non-point source pollution, and that's why as a division, we think a lot about pollution, not just flooding. So what is non-point source pollution? Non-point source pollution is the type of pollution that is created from everyday activities, such as walking the dog and washing your car, and all of these things can accumulate from suburban environments, urban environments, and even cropland to pollute rivers. And why is this such an important issue for stormwater is that the stormwater infrastructure in Braintree connects directly to our water bodies. So here is Sunset Lake, and you can see that there is a storm drain in Sunset Lake that connects directly to this outfall into the lake. So anything in this parking lot, any pollutants that are left behind, will go straight into the lake without treatment. So one of the things we can address with green stormwater infrastructure is diverting the stormwater and giving it some sort of natural treatment before it goes into our water bodies. So Braintree water bodies fail state water quality standards. We're definitely not alone in this. Many cities and municipalities across the state have this issue, but that's one reason why we're trying to address the stormwater runoff pollution, because it is the main reason that we're failing these standards. And that's true for the Charles River watershed, that's true all across the country, and that's why it's so important to address these issues. So one of the ways we do that is through public outreach, and our public outreach pages are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So if you're interested in learning more about our public education component or getting involved in our other events, I'm just going to throw those links in the chat for anyone to go to. Now, finally, what is green stormwater infrastructure? Green stormwater infrastructure uses natural and low-impact technology to capture and treat stormwater. So there's a couple examples that already exist in town. Here is Sunset Lake, and this is the rain garden at Sunset Lake. This uses the natural plant root systems in soil to capture and treat stormwater before it enters the lake over here. And then there are also tree box filters across town. Here's the one at Hollingsworth Park. And similar principle, this uses the natural root system of the tree to treat and capture the stormwater. So the really exciting thing about green stormwater infrastructure is that it can handle traditional infrastructure problems like preventing flooding, dealing with pollutants, and potentially providing water quantity, but it also can create other benefits, such as improved aesthetics, increasing shades if you're increasing vegetative cover, educational opportunities, so using the green infrastructure to show how the system works, soil health, this is really important for all sorts of ecosystem and environmental health factors. It can also increase home and property values. So if you have that improved aesthetics, or if you have better control over the stormwater in your property, this has been shown to increase your home values. And finally, last but not least, it can also improve wildlife habitat. So for instance, instead of just having a giant gray pipe, you can have something that other animals can use that solves the same problem. So why is the town of Braintree pursuing this? Is that we've actually gotten a grant from Mass DEP, and this is the 604B grant program, which is a part of the Environmental Protection Agency, and that is a part of the Clean Water Act. So these are for water quality management planning grants. So we are using this grant money to do public outreach, to discuss green stormwater infrastructure, but also to design the sites that we're going to talk about later, so we can actually use this to apply for future grant funding, such as the 319, which is also named after a section under the Clean Water Act. So with that, I will pass it over to my colleague Cindy to tell you more about the site specifics.
Thanks, Madeline. The town of Braintree has been working on this grant since the fall of we got the funding finally in the fall of 2019. And part of our scope of work was to identify all of the town-owned parcels and sort through them to see which ones were the most suitable for a stormwater retrofit. So there were a number of criteria that we looked at in conjunction with our engineering consultant, Niche Engineering, and a couple of the engineers that we've been working with are on the call with us tonight. They helped us prepare a list of criteria, some of which involve the sheer size of the site, the access to the property, could you get there with vehicles, the presence of existing impervious surface like pavement and roofs, because those are the things that generate stormwater. So you want to have a site that actually is generating stormwater that needs to be treated. Area available on the site to install a stormwater best management practice, and the potential of the locations for an educational component. I'm going to run through the group of sites that you see here before you, Smith's Beach, Watson Park, 85 Quincy Ave, which some people know as the home of the DPW, the Office of Elder Affairs, 74 Pond Street, Hollingsworth Park, and Oakton Ave. And this is a parcel that is part of the town forest off of Liberty Street. So it's the eastern side of the town forest. Next slide, please. So this map gives you an idea of where the sites are located across town. And I'm sure most of you are on the call tonight because you received a door hanger on your property that alerted you to the fact that we were having this meeting. We did get a number of phone calls at the division that we've been answering. And as Madeline said, we're happy to answer all of your questions. We may not be able to get to all of them in the time we have allotted tonight, but if you're asking them in the chat function, we have a record of all the questions that were asked. And along with the recording, we will be sending the questions and answers to the group of people who registered for the meeting so that everybody is aware of what questions got asked and what the answers to the questions were. Next slide, please. This is a little bit of a legend for some of the maps that you're going to see on the individual sites tonight. Not every site has this information on it. Our GIS system depends on how close you zoom in before you start to see the stormwater layer. So what you see here, the yellow circles are drainage manholes. The yellow pipes are drainage pipes. And the little squares with a grid on them are individual catch basins. So I may be talking about some of these things as we go through the various sites. Next slide, please. So site one is Smith's Beach. And this, I guess this site is a combination of the beach itself and the parking area that's across the street from the Metropolitan Yacht Club. Next slide, please. So on the map here, you see the beach itself along Edge Hill Road and Vinedale Road, and the parking lot that's across the street from the Metropolitan Yacht Club. If you look very carefully, you can see areas where there's some erosion into the river itself. So down at the bottom of the site, Madeline, I don't know if you can put your cursor there. That erosion is being caused by the outfall pipe that you saw in the next slide. We can go to the next slide. I could use those pictures as well. So the street drainage on Edge Hill Road and on Vinedale go directly into drainage pipes that discharge onto the beach and are visible at low tide. So the upper left-hand corner, that is the outfall pipe from the two catch basins that are shown on the picture in the center of the site, right near the beach itself. The slide on the photo on the far right is an eroded area from another outfall that is adjacent to this manhole that you see on the bottom left. That's a drainage manhole that's in the beach itself that discharges water from additional catch basins on Vinedale Road. The idea here is to figure out a way to capture this stormwater and treat it before it enters the river, because this water is going directly into the river without treatment whatsoever. Next slide, please.
Just to check, we have a message to the chat. Is everyone else seeing the slides advancing, or is just one person having a problem? Please post to the chat if you can see the slides advancing. Okay.
Okay, good.
I recommend if you're having that problem, just exit the meeting and come back in, and it should help. Thank you for everyone.
Thanks for responding, everybody. These two pictures are of the parking area across the street from the yacht club. It's in a state of disrepair and currently does not have any stormwater management whatsoever. So the stormwater that's generated from this paved surface goes into the catch basins on Vondell Road and directly into the river from there. Next slide, please. Site number 2 is Watson Park, home to the East Braintree Little League and the Braintree Babe Ruth Group. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this site. It's also home to the very popular splash pad, which unfortunately we couldn't use this summer. On this map, you can actually see the stormwater elements that I was mentioning earlier. So again, the yellow circles are drain manholes, the yellow pipes are drainage pipes, and then the little squares with grids on them are individual catch basins. So this site has 2 very large diameter pipes that go through the middle of the park, in between the ball fields, and they are part of a watershed that extends quite a ways up the hill to the north of the site. It's an almost 25-acre watershed that drains to these 2 pipes, and all of that water ends up right at the edge of the river. And if we go to the next slide, I can show you a couple of pictures of what the ends of those pipes look like. So there's a stone head wall. If you're familiar with the stone dust path that runs along the edge of the water at Watson Park, you can see this head wall from the path. And the pipes are deteriorating. They do need to have some work done to them, but there is water coming out of them almost continuously. So the plan would be in this location, again, to do something closer to Gordon Road that would intercept some of the stormwater that's coming off of the residential neighborhood and treat it before it gets directly discharged into the river. Next slide, please. Site 3 is 85 Quincy Ave. Next slide. As you see here, 85 Quincy Ave is the home of the DPW administration. Our division's offices are here. The DPW director's office is here. The engineering department is here. This building was a former branch library and has 2 stories with access on each story. So the parking lot adjacent to Gordon Road is on the high side of the site, and the parking lot in the back of the building closer to the yacht club is on the low side of the building. So there's a pretty significant grade change from the upper parking lot to the lower parking lot. But unfortunately, there is no stormwater management of this paved area or of the roof at the present time. So the water that's generated by the pavement and the roof sheet drains across all the pavement from north to south, and then discharges across the steep slope that you see that separates this site from the yacht club itself. And then from there goes directly into the river. There is a landscaped area on the western side of this site, which is available for a stormwater treatment best management practice. So we did do some soil testing there, and the soils do seem to be suitable for an infiltration solution, but we will see what happens with the conceptual designs when we get to that point. Next slide, please. The photograph on the left is looking from north from the edge of the parking lot up the hill. So you can see where that grade change is on the right-hand side of the picture. The picture on the right is looking in the opposite direction. So you can see that there's a fairly steep slope there. All of the stormwater flows across the pavement and over the edge of that slope right now. Next slide. Site number 4 is the Office of Elder Affairs on Cleveland Avenue. Next slide. On this map, you see the original building that was on the site. Since the time that this picture was taken, this is a 2019 aerial photograph, an addition was built to the building that actually encroached on the outfield of the existing ball field. So that ball field is no longer in use. The town is planning to expand the parking lot for this facility because it does get a lot of use. And there is a conveniently located drainage line that goes through the center of the site. Again, you can see the yellow circles for drain manholes and the catch basin, and that's a drainage pipe that goes through the middle of the site. So we have good access to the existing drainage system for a stormwater solution on this site. What you don't see on this map just off to the west is the Manatequit River. So at the bottom of the slope that you see here on the left-hand side of the site is the river itself. So this drainage system that goes through the middle of the site and actually includes some additional stormwater structures on Harrison Avenue does discharge directly to the Manatequit. We would be intercepting this line and installing some sort of stormwater management solution in the landscaped area. Next slide, please. These are a couple of photographs of the parking lot, the existing parking lot adjacent to the playground area. The upper right-hand side is a view down the center of the site where you saw that drainage pipe and a group of manholes. And then the grassed area that you see on the lower right-hand side, in the center of it is a manhole cover, and that's the last structure in the line. So we may be making a connection to that manhole. Next slide. Site number 5 is 74 Pond Street. Next slide, please. Many of you are familiar with this town-owned building. It's currently the home of the Recreation Department and the Retirement Board, along with a couple of other school groups and a catering business is also run out of this building. The town also owns the building adjacent to the site, 90 Pond Street, but it's possible that that building might be put up for sale. So even though the parking lots are shared between the two buildings, our intent is to develop a stormwater management system just on the 74 Pond Street site that would hopefully treat the majority of the pavement, probably in the back of the site. It's the access to an area to discharge is better in the back of the site. And we do have sufficient green space back there that would allow the installation of a constructed solution for stormwater management. At the present time, there are 2 individual catch basins along the southerly side of the back parking lot. If you look really closely, you can see a couple of little tiny spots that look darker than the rest of the pavement. Those are the 2 catch basins. They were designed as dry wells when they were originally constructed. They are not connected to each other, and neither of them has a discharge pipe that allows the water to escape from them. They have pretty much outlived their usefulness. They don't infiltrate as quickly as they did when they were first installed. So there is occasionally a flooding problem in the back of this site. Next slide, please. Here on the left, you see the back of 74 Pond Street and the edge of the parking lot where the 2 catch basins are located. The center photograph shows the existing basketball court. And if you look carefully, there's an old swing set in the picture as well. And then the slide on the photograph on the right is the landscaped area that might be the location for a stormwater solution for this site. Next slide, please. Site number 6 is Hollingsworth Park, which is home to the Braintree American Little League. So the other large area of baseball fields on the western side of town. Hollingsworth Park is kind of a long, narrow parcel, and it has a fair amount of impervious surface because there are parking lots, adjacent to most of the ball fields. But other than the tree box filter that was installed about a year ago, which is up near the beginning of the site, there really is no stormwater management. What happens is the water, and those of you familiar with this site know that it starts out at a fairly high elevation and goes down and down and down as you get to the 2 lower fields at the bottom of the site. The water from the parking lot flows down the driveway and then takes an abrupt left-hand turn and discharges onto another piece of town-owned property that's adjacent to the ball field. So it's that undeveloped wooded area that most of you might have noticed if you are going to games at the lower 2 fields. Next slide, please. In the picture on the left, you can see a speed bump that was installed to keep people from going too quickly, back and forth where there's so many kids playing ball, and also the little playground. And in this picture, you can see the stormwater that's been generated from a rain event coming down the center of the pavement. And there's actually, where that little circle is on the speed bump, there's a pipe that allows the stormwater to go through the speed bump instead of backing up in back of it and causing a puddle and potential icing problem. So the water goes down that corridor, and then the photograph on the right shows it making the turn, going off the pavement and creating a fairly significant eroded gully on the property next door. Next slide, please. The other possibility, or the other element of this site, is that there are a group of residential streets that also discharge stormwater into the same element, that same undeveloped parcel that's next to Hollingsworth Park. Lake Street, what you see here in the photograph on the left, is the end of the drainage line that collects the stormwater from Lake Street. And it is also eroding a gully onto the site, the town-owned site that's adjacent to Hollingsworth Park. So our hope is that we could come up with a solution that might collect and treat the stormwater from both the park and from the discharge point off Lake Street. I'm not sure if this is going to be possible because there is a significant wetland area on the parcel adjacent to the park. We have done a wetland delineation, and so our consultant is aware of where the wetland boundary might be out there, and we will be working outside of the resource areas on our design solutions for this site. Next slide, please. And last but not least is site number 7, Oakton Avenue. That is a very small street that intersects with Liberty, and the parcel in question is one of the group of lots that make up the town forest. This parcel has 2 different stormwater outfalls that are located on it. Yep, Madeline's got her cursor pointing to them. You don't see the catch basins on the outfall on the right because they haven't been mapped yet. But on the left-hand side, the westerly outfall, you can see that that pipe collects water from Cardinal Court. So there's a group of catch basins on Cardinal Court that collect the stormwater from that roadway and pipe it out so that it discharges onto the town forest property. This site is especially interesting because the town forest and a lot of property to the east side of Liberty Street are included in the Cranberry Brook area of critical environmental concern. And that is a specially protected, I don't recall exactly how big that site is. Can you skip to the next one, Madeline, while I'm mentioning this? This is the map for the Cranberry Brook, an area of critical environmental concern. It was designated as a protected area in 1983 by the State Department of Conservation and Recreation. And that gives it some additional protections when it comes to future development. The bulk of this land is owned publicly, either by the town of Braintree or the town of Holbrook. But there is a piece that is privately owned. And any development that's proposed within an ACEC is subject to the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act, which is another level of permitting that is quite a bit more stringent than you might find on areas that are not part of an ACEC. The site that we're talking about, Madeline, if you could go back to the map, that would be great. There we go. What you see kind of in the center of this map is Cranberry Brook itself. It's along the edge of that area that's hatched in red. And that brook is a tributary to the Rishardi Reservoir, which is one of our public water supply areas, which is another reason why it's a more protected area than some of these other sites. Next slide. So what you see here are pictures of the 2 existing outfall pipes. The photograph on the left is the western outfall. This is the one that collects the water, the stormwater from Cardinal Court. As you can see, the pipe is very exposed. It doesn't seem to be in bad shape, but it is getting to the point where it may have outlived its usefulness just a bit. The center photograph, if you look carefully, you can see another area of exposed pipe for this westerly outfall. And then the photograph on the far right is the other outfall. This one collects water from Oakton Ave itself from 2 catch basins. But as you can see, there's quite a bit of silt that winds up in those catch basins because this pipe is almost completely full. However, both of them have a fairly long run through the slope on the portions of the site where they discharge. And the idea here would be to possibly cut the pipes a bit shorter and have them discharge into some sort of green infrastructure that would allow some of the pollutants to be removed before this water ends up in Cranberry Brook. So that is all 7 of the sites. As Madeline mentioned earlier, we are planning a second meeting sometime during the summer after the conceptual plans for all 7 of these sites have been prepared, so that All of you can see what the design solutions look like and comment on them. At the moment, this project that we are funded for at the moment is a planning project. It does not include funding for construction of any of these conceptual plans. As Madeline mentioned earlier, there is another DEP grant fund called the 319 grant, also using federal funds from the EPA, and that is primarily meant for the construction of these types of green infrastructure solutions. We're hoping to pick one or possibly more, depending on what our cost estimates end up looking like, of these sites to go forward with a 319 grant application in the future. Once we have the conceptual plans in hand, we also would be eligible for several other grant programs. So it's something to consider, and we would love to hear what your comments are about these sites and about the program.
Great, thanks, Cindy. So I just want to remind everyone that if you're joining us via the phone, you need to dial *9 to raise your hand, and that way we know that you want to make a comment. And once you've raised your hand, you'll need to dial *6 to unmute, and then *6 again to mute when you're done speaking. For everyone else, please put your questions and comments in the chat, and we have a few already. So I just want to start, we had a question early on if the meeting recording will be posted, and it will be posted both to the town website and to the town YouTube. I will also be sending an email to all participants, giving them both a link to the meeting and a summary of what we talked about today. So the first question that came in is from Gabriel, and he wants to know what our thoughts are to better utilize Penniman Park, which is on the Council on Elder Affairs site, and suggests maybe we put in a small dog park.
Well, I will say that a dog park is not part of the scope of this particular grant program. We're concentrating on treating the stormwater from an expanded parking lot on this site. There will be a site plan for the Elder Affairs site that's being developed now by both our consultant and the town's engineering department, and that will be available for public comment sometime, I would think, late winter, early spring, because I know we would like to try and get that one constructed in the next construction season.
Okay, our next question is from Lisa, and she says, all of these sites clearly need attention. Has there been any assessment of the cost benefit of each site? And I think she's wondering what might be the most cost-effective interventions we can do, and if so, which sites would those be?
Well, part of the scope of services for our engineering consultant includes cost estimates for the conceptual plans that they're preparing. So that will definitely be a consideration on which of the sites we go forward with looking for grant funding. So it's part of the project, but those estimates have to wait until we're done with the conceptual plans.
So the next question is from Mark, and he would like to know how the sites are going to be prioritized for design and construction.
Well, I would say that the stakeholders will have something to say about what the priority should be. I am aware that there is funding for the construction of the expanded parking lot at the Office of Elder Affairs. So that is likely to be the first project that is built. After that, we will be looking for input from the community on which things they think are the most appropriate, along with input from the various departments at the DPW, planning, and from conservation as well.
Yes, I just want to emphasize what Cindy said there. Like, your guys' input is really important. So if you think there is a critical need at one of these sites, please share that, and that will be continued as part of our process. So the next question is from Diana, apologies. And she wants to know when work would begin if we got funded.
I would think at the very earliest 2022. And that would be if we got funded for construction through a grant program, because I don't think we have sufficient funds in our operating budget to build one of these projects.
Okay, thanks. So Mark would like to ask, who is the engineering consultant?
Our engineering consultant is Niche Engineering. They do a lot of public work and do a lot of stormwater design.
Okay, so the next question is from Sandra, and would flooding at Smith Beach and sometimes at Watson Park have any impact on this project?
Well, it's certainly a consideration. There is another project going on at Watson Park that you may or may not be aware of that is to restore a portion of the salt marsh that's adjacent to the Weymouth Fore River. And there is a flood control element to that project. I'm pretty sure that if you look on the Conservation Commission's website, you would see something about it, because that project is much further advanced than the ones that we're talking about. Flooding at Smith's Beach, I mean, that would be a consideration as part of the design. So it's kind of a combination. We would try and alleviate flooding issues, and current flooding issues would be a consideration in the design.
Okay, so the next question is from Danielle, and she would like to know, are we proposing that all of these sites are improved, or are you asking for a limited improvements to a certain number of sites? What does the existing town budget set aside for improvements of the unaddressed sites?
Danielle, I'm a little confused about the unaddressed sites. This project is meant to be a roadmap for us going forward, in the hopes that once we have 7 conceptual plans prepared, we can pick them off one at a time as funding becomes available, either through grants or through capital improvements or other means. So our goal would be eventually to build all of them, but that may not be feasible financially. So as I mentioned earlier, I believe that the Elder Affairs parking lot expansion and stormwater management would be the first one to be constructed. After that, it's going to depend on available funding.
Okay. So the next question is, what sites will have the best environmental impact?
Well, the consultant is looking at the potential pollutant removal level for each one of these sites, and that is factoring into the designs. I do not have that information at the tip of my fingers at the moment. Each one of them will have some significant environmental impact. It's possible that Watson Park might have the most impact because of the sheer size of the watershed that's involved. But I would venture to guess that there would be positive environmental impact on all of these sites.
Okay, so our next question is from Diane, not to be confused with Diana. And for her question, she wants to know, what are the pros and cons, such as the negative impact on wildlife and their habitats? Oh, apologies, what would the potential cons be? It'd be nice to know how the visible portions of these sites would look too.
It would depend on the type of solution that's being proposed for each site, what the aesthetic impact would be. For instance, a rain garden solution would probably be aesthetically pleasing and would have a beneficial impact on wildlife and pollinators, depending on which plants were specified for the installation. Other solutions, if we ended up doing a subsurface infiltration system on one of the sites, you probably would not even know that it existed. Many of those systems are under paved areas or underground, and collect the water and discharge it through a stone layer at a reduced velocity. So it's difficult to say what the impact would be on each one of these sites because, as I said, the conceptual plans are still being developed. A number of these sites are within the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, and so there would be a permitting process involved with the commission before anything actually ended up being built, because we would need approval from them.
Okay. So the next question is from another Cindy, and she says that she is close to Site 6 and would like to know if you will be lowering the elevation because we already have a major flooding problem in the area that runs over the golf course. When there is heavy rainfall, my backyard fills with overflow from the Farm River. Are you improving this flooding or creating more overflow? And that's for Site 6 at Hollingsworth Park.
Yep. Cindy, I would say that it is our intention to alleviate some problems, not cause additional problems. Part of the concept of stormwater management involves slowing the velocity of the water and holding it back so that it can infiltrate through the soil instead of rushing through a pipe into a surface water and causing issues with overflow there. I can't tell you exactly what we're going to be doing at Hollingsworth Park yet, because as I mentioned, the designs are still in process. But once that design is completed and we have our second meeting, we would love to hear your comments on it.
Okay. So the next question is from Gary, and he would like to know, there's been a lot of talk about drainage pipes. Where do they drain to?
Eventually, I would say that all of them wind up discharging into a surface water. It could be the Manatequit, it could be the Fore River, it could be Cranberry Brook, it could be a wetland resource area that then drains into one of the surface waters. The old style drainage design, the purpose was to collect the water off of the roads, put it into a pipe, and get it into a surface water body as fast as you can. We have since realized that the result of doing that is that the pollutants that are accumulating on the roadways are being washed into our surface water bodies, and that's what's causing the impairment in the quality of the water. So the world of stormwater is readjusting to try and capture stormwater where it's created instead of concentrating it and sending it out a discharge pipe into a river, stream, or pond. So on the town website, you should have the ability to look at our GIS system. I'm not sure if the stormwater layer is something that you can see, but we do have a lot of the outfalls in town mapped, and we have over 300 different outfalls in various locations all around town. And we've showed you some pictures of some of those tonight. If you want to see a couple of very easy to see ones, go to Smith's Beach at low tide and you'll see the two of them there.
All right, our next question is from Carrie, and she would like to know have you reviewed the Riverwalk project at Watson Park and Smith Beach?
I have seen the plans for the modification to the walk along the edge of Watson Park. A Riverwalk project at Smith's Beach, I am not aware of plans for that.
Okay. So the next question, more of a comment really, is from Rob, and He says, I like the Smith Beach area. Are you looking at sea level rise and storm surge as part of the design for Smith Beach? Could be opportunities for additional funding there.
Thanks for the comment, Rob. I think that coastal storm flowage is definitely a concern at Smith Beach and is something that would have to be taken into consideration as part of the design. And, you know, we all know that sea level rise is happening, so that would have to be taken into consideration as well.
Okay. The next question is from David, and I think I can actually take this one, Cindy. So David says that the catch basin at Smith Beach clogs with leaves during strong rainstorms. I usually am out there in my ankles cleaning up the leaves. Is there any way to remedy that to keep it from clogging up? And unfortunately, since there are so many trees in the area on people's properties, it's up to the property owners to collect the leaves. I'm really grateful that you're taking the time to do that. And I would recommend reaching out to your neighbors and asking them to ensure that their leaf piles are picked up or consolidated before major storms. This can help prevent flooding in your street, and it could be a fun activity to do as a neighborhood. Okay, so, the next question is from Allie, and they say, I'm sorry I joined the meeting a little late, so you may have already mentioned this, but what type of green infrastructure are you putting in? I am a graduate student at urban planning, and I just did a GIS project on the bioswale potential in Braintree. Very interested in hearing more.
Allie, as we mentioned earlier, the conceptual plans for these 7 sites are in process at the moment. So we don't have specifics on each one of them yet, but there is going to be a second public meeting, probably mid to late summer this year, that will discuss the design solutions for each one of these sites. So you're on our list now, so you'll be definitely getting a notification when that meeting takes place.
Okay, the next question is from Mark, and Mark would like to know if there are any MEPA or EPA issues involved.
We might have to do a MEPA filing for the Oakton Road sites because of the ACEC. And I do have a comment from our consulting engineer who is in the background here on the call, who tells me that Watson Park, Hollingsworth Park, and Smith's Beach have the highest potential pathogen load reduction based on the existing load. So the environmental impact will be the most intense on those 3 sites.
Okay, our next comment is from Jessica. They say, you listed a number of potential benefits of green infrastructure. Have you considered using those as ranking criteria for prioritized sites? It might make it easier for the public to provide input on the importance of those benefits. If you combine with the technical advice on your engineers and costs, this could be a transparent way of prioritizing sites, as well as informing the types of GIS selected. Otherwise, we might all show our own neighborhood biases for what is most important to the project, as well intended as that might be. And I think that's a really good comment. We are doing some work on prioritizing based off these specific benefits as well, but I think it would be really great to do a follow-up with these participants and also with the general public to see what benefits they value most from green infrastructure. That's a great idea, Jessica. Okay, so the next comment is from Gabriel. Not really related to this grant, but I always wanted to know, the work that was done a couple of years ago on the rotary around 193/Best Buy, was that because of stormwater remediation? Why was there a pond built there with trees and a wildlife refuge?
Gabriel, I unfortunately was not in Braintree when that work was done. But I believe that that is within the state highway layout. So the design would have been done by Mass DOT. And I'm sure there was a stormwater element to it because that rotary does generate quite a bit of stormwater because there's so much impervious surface. But as far as the specifics of the design, I do not know the answer to that.
Okay, so that's the end of the questions for the moment. While you guys are thinking about other questions, I'm just going to throw the link in the chat for the end of meeting survey. And you can put your thoughts about how the meeting was run. You can put any questions or comments you didn't get the chance to share in the survey. So I'm throwing that link in the chat now while everyone is thinking. And once again, if you're joining us on the phone and you would like to make a comment, please dial *9 and then we'll know that you've raised your hand. And if you would like to unmute, if you get called on to speak, dial *6 to unmute and dial *6 again to remute.
Looks like we're done with questions. Thank you so much for everybody, for all of you participating. It's very helpful for us to hear comments from people in the neighborhoods of these individual sites. And please take a look at the survey.
Yeah, and while you're filling that out, I just want to mention a few upcoming events. We are going to be doing a rain barrel distribution, and this is a really great program where residents of Braintree are able to purchase rain barrels at a discounted price. I think it's something like $60 from a Massachusetts-based company, the Great American Rainbow Company. So keep your eyes posted for that. And you can find information on that now by going to bit.ly/Braintree Barrel. So I'll also throw that in the chat. All right. Thank you, everyone.